Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. Do type into the comments box where you're calling in from. We want to hear where you're calling in from and whether you're a student or a teacher, because this stream is for you. So, welcome, and it's great to have you with us. To let you know a little bit more about us, I'm Anna, and I'm joined today by Paul Woodfall, one of our brilliant teacher trainers here at Oxford University Press. You might recognise him from our other live streams and our online events. Hi, Paul.
Hello, good afternoon from Dubai.
It's great to have you with us. Oh,
Thank you. It's great to be.
we've got people joining from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do type into the chat box if you're just joining us. Let us know where you're calling in from. We've got a really exciting session planned today, and it's in two parts, which includes a live reading from one of our Oxford graded readers called The Faithful Ghost and Other Tall Tales. If you've got any questions during the sessions, do type them into the comments, and I'll pass over the mic now to Paul. Paul, take it away.
Hello, I wonder if we have teachers or students joining us this afternoon. We should have both, Anna. For the benefit of those who are joining, I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to wait. We have people are beginning to say hi, Manav. Hi to somebody from Colombia. Hello from Colombia and India. Interesting. Hello, Yi Lin has joined us again from the UK. Good afternoon. And just about good afternoon in the UK. Wonderful. Greetings, Saliha from Algeria. Dennis from Japan. Wonderful. We're in for a little Halloween treat, and as Anna introduced, we're going to be looking at a story. It's called Man Size in Marble. It's a Halloween story. Hello, Yunhee. Welcome to the stream. Teacher or student? I wonder what our audience, Mario from Mexico. Hello, Mario Jimenez. What are we dealing with? Matru City in Egypt. Thank you, Hamis. Great for your warm wishes. Thank you, Hamis. Now, are you teachers or students? If you'd just like to quickly type into the chat so I have an idea if we have mainly students or if we have mainly teachers in with us at the moment. So if you could just put in the comments, Charak is a teacher. Welcome, Charak. Saliha is a teacher. Yes, thank you. Narendra from Nepal, teacher or student, Narendra. Erika from Brazil, teacher or student. Manav is an ELT trainer. Okay, so a teacher, Manav. Wonderful. Teacher, Charak. Thank you. So we're getting a lot of teachers here. Erika, teacher. Right, Saliha, as I said. Okay, so if you're a teacher, then let me explain what I'm going to do. I'm going to be giving a reading of the story here. It's taken from Dominoes, which is our readers' collection. And Dominoes has many levels. This is taken from the red level of Dominoes, which is level 3. It's got 1,000 head words. I'm not going to be reading 1,000 words exactly, but head words, which means that it's at B1 level of English. B1. But as a reader, you're going to be listening to the story. You're going to be listening to me speaking. So it's a little bit more difficult. And to help, I'm going to be putting up some useful clues to help you with the story. So let's begin. The story begins with, my name is Jack Collis, and every word of this story is true, although many people probably won't believe it. These days, people need a logical explanation before they believe anything. If you want an explanation like that, perhaps my wife Laura and I just imagined everything that happened to us on that 31st of October, 1893. I'll let you, the reader, or in this case, I'll let you, the listener, decide. So that's the situation. It's a book that was a story that was written over 100 years ago, and we have put it into our graded readers in a language. We say the story has been abridged, it has been edited and changed a little bit to make it accessible because the language is Victorian English. And to get us into the story, let's go back to the picture there. I'm going to read you the first section, and I'd like you to think about Jack and Laura. These are the two main characters in the story. Which one is a painter? Which one is a writer? Who is poor? Who hates cooking and cleaning? And who loves listening to old stories? When you think you know an answer to any of these points, please put your answer in the comments. Maybe you'd like to take a quick snapshot of these points. Maybe you'd like to take a screenshot, whatever. As you're listening, look out for these. Maybe you can remember them. Who's a painter? Who's a writer? Who's poor? Who hates cooking and cleaning? Who loves listening to old stories? And we've already got a guest come in without even listening to the story. My guess, Charak says, my guess is that Jack is a writer and Laura a painter. Yi Lin, Jack is a painter, Laura is a writer. Interesting. Let's begin. As I say, Jack is the narrator, so I'm now going to tell you the story from Jack's point of view. And remember the date. It's the 31st of October, 1893. When I became engaged to Laura, we knew we wouldn't have much money when we were married. I used to paint in those days, and Laura wrote. Living in town was expensive, so we started looking for a country cottage, something pretty. On our wedding day, we were still homeless. But on our honeymoon, we found the perfect place. It was in Brenzett, a little village on a hill in the south, not far from the coast. We'd gone there from the seaside town where we were staying to visit the church. Nearby, we found a pretty cottage, standing all alone with about 2 miles from the village. And it was a long, low building with flowers around it. All that was left of a big old house which had once stood there. We decided to rent it at once. It was awfully cheap. We spent a few months, a little while getting the furniture ready, shopping, and it was, great. We felt comfortable to live there. It was easy, in fact, to work there. I never got tired of painting the countryside and the wonderful sky I could see through the open window. And Laura sat at the table and wrote about all of it and about me. We found a tall old woman from the village to cook and clean for us. She was tidy, skilled at cooking, and understood everything about gardens. She was the perfect servant for us. And she also used to tell us tales of ghosts who sometimes met people in the neighborhood when it was late at night. So basically, Laura hated cooking and cleaning, and I loved listening to old stories. So we let Mrs. Dorman manage the cottage and used her old tales in stories with pictures that we sent to magazines. And this helped bring us in some well-needed money. Okay, let's go back to our questions and let's see in the comments, let's see how many of these you've understood. So we go back to our there we are. So who's the painter and who's the writer? Yi Lin, well done. Yi Lin has already told us in a previous comment that, there we are, Jack is the painter, Laura is the writer. Poor. What about poor? Saliha says Laura hates cooking and cleaning. Thank you, Saliha. Right, Saliha, thank you for that. Laura hates cooking. Iram is also, yep, Laura hates cooking. Who loves listening to old stories? And who is poor? Both were poor. Very good, Saliha. And do we have any others in the comments? Pabasara says Jack's a writer and Laura's a painter. I'm sorry, Pabasara, your prediction wasn't correct. Do we have any others? Yi Lin, Laura hates cooking and cleaning. Great, yes. And finally, who loves listening to old stories? Yi Lin is very active this afternoon. Thank you for your comment there. Jack loves listening to old stories. And both, Sachin, both were poor. Yes, writers and painters are not known as multi-millionaires. There are a few, but usually writers and painters, especially when they're young, don't have very much money. So that's the situation. 3 months of marriage, happily living in the cottage with their lovely cleaner and cook, Mrs. Dorman, and we're ready to continue. Let's just move on and to go to the next question, because I think we can also answer a very specific question. Before we do that, let's just have a look, because it's quite important to remember that the story of Jack and Laura relates to man's size in marble. And you can see here's a picture of Jack and Laura. Where are they? Where are they? And what can you see behind them? In the comments, if you just look at the picture there, because this is really central to the story, where are Jack and Laura, and what do you think is behind them in the picture? Yi Lin, have you read this story already? They're in the church. Iram, they're in the church, correct. What is behind them? In the church. Thank you, Iram. What is behind them? Can you see two figures behind them? Nana Sell says Laura and Jack seem to be getting married in the church. Yes, that's a very good idea, Nana Sell. Nana say about you. Laura and Jack seem to be getting married. Well, actually, they're already married because, as we've established, they've been married for 3 months now. So yes, it could be a picture of the marriage, but I'm interested. Sachin says they're in the church. Yi Lin has actually read the story. I thought so. Thank you for telling us. What can you see behind them? Because this is quite important. There's two figures behind them. Yes, there are windows behind them. Diane, thank you. Windows. But to the left and the right of the windows, you can see two figures. Yi Lin says statues. Yes, two statues. You've read the story already. Let's just have a look at these statues for a moment, because they're quite important. They are on top of tombs. There are two tombs. A grave is outside in the earth. A tomb is usually made of a hard stone. Yes, Katerina says a grave. They are not graves. Graves are outside in the ground. These are tombs. That's Tombs. And the figures are made of a very hard, Sachin is correct, they are tombs. And if we look at the figures, they're made of marble. And marble is usually white, but it can be black. It's a very hard and quite an expensive stone, usually used in building for kitchens, bathrooms, but can also be made for statues. And in this case, for figures, the knights who are dressed in armor lying on top of the tomb. And a knight is, we normally associate knights, they're dressed in armor to protect them with swords, and they had a duty to fight for their king or queen, and knights are often shown in pictures using riding horses and wearing armor. So these two figures, let's just go back to that picture now in the church. These two figures are knights in marble. Marble being a very heavy stone. And this is why the story is called Man Size in Marble. So we'll come to that question, Ching, a bit later on. It's not relevant to the story. Let's go back to the story. And if we could just pop up the first question. I wonder how many of you are able to answer the first question. Yi Lin, don't answer. Let's see what the others think. You've read the story. Jack and Laura and Jack decide to rent the cottage. Why did they decide to rent the cottage? Because one, it's near the sea. Sion, yes, like the Knights Templar, exactly. Thank you for your comment. Number two, they find it when they're on their honeymoon, and that's why they decide to rent the cottage. Or number three, they don't have a lot of money. Which do you think is the correct answer? Irum, number three. Thank you for that. Saliha, number three. Oh, everybody's putting number three down. Wonderful. Okay, I would agree with all of you. Thank you, Papasara. Thank you, Asajiru. Diane, all of you say number three. Well, very good, because that is the answer. It is the best. Lorena, thank you for number three as well. Excellent, excellent work. I put ticks for the other two as well because they are kind of correct. It is near the sea. It's near the coast. And they do find the cottage when they're on their honeymoon. However, the best answer is they don't have a lot of money. So well done to everybody. Let's move on. I'm going to start reading. Here are some questions for you to think about. Are you ready? We had 3 months of married happiness and never argued. Then, one October evening, I went to visit our only neighbour, Dr. Kelly, a pleasant Irishman, for a talk and a smoke of my pipe. I left Laura all smiles, writing a funny magazine story about village life. But when I came back, I found her sitting on the window seat crying. What's the matter? I asked. Oh, Jack, it's Mrs. Dorman, she moaned. She says she has to go before the end of the month to care for her sick niece. But I don't believe her because her niece is always ill. I think someone's turned her against us. She seemed so strange when she spoke to me. Oh, don't worry, dearest. I'll speak to Mrs. Dorman when she comes back. Trying to calm her down. Perhaps she wants more money. It'll be all right. Let's go out for a walk to the church. The church was large and lovely, and we enjoyed going there on nights when the moon was full. The path to it went through a wood, past 2 fields, and round the churchyard wall. It had been the old way. They used to take coffins to the church for funerals. There were lots of dark trees in the churchyard. The church was a heavy wooden one, and the windows were of coloured glass. Inside there were rows of dark wooden seats, and at the eastern end there were 2 grey marble figures of old knights in armour, one on each side lying on their tombs. Strangely, you could always see them, even if the rest of the church was in absolute darkness. Their names were lost in the past, but the villagers said they'd been wild and terrible men, and that one night in a great storm, lightning had struck their big old house and destroyed it. Interestingly, this was the place where now our cottage stood. Okay, let's just go back to this question while we leave Laura and Jack in the church. For the first 3 months in the cottage, what is the answer? Thank you, Diane. She says they both work and are very happy. Iram, they are not doing the cooking and cleaning. Remember, Iram, that Mrs. Dorman is doing the cooking and cleaning. Nana say they both work and are very happy. Yes. So that's what we want. Yes, the cooking and cleaning at the moment is Mrs. Dorman. Are they afraid of ghosts? I haven't mentioned it yet. They're in the church. We left them in the church after their walk. Let's see what happens next. So let's just check the answer there for Lorena as well. Thinks it's number one. Charek thinks it's number one. Let's check the answer. And the answer is they're perfectly fine and happy. But Mrs. Dorman, she's got a sick niece, or has she? When we arrived home from the church, Mrs. Dorman had come back from the village. I asked her to come into my painting room for a short talk. Mrs. Dorman, I said when we were alone, aren't you happy here with us? Oh, no, sir. You and your dear lady have always been most kind to me. Aren't we paying you enough? No, sir, I get quite enough. Then why don't you want to stay with us? My niece is ill, she said uneasily. I must leave before the end of the month. But your niece has been ill since we arrived. A long, uncomfortable silence followed. I broke it. Can't you stay for another week, Mrs. Dorman? No, sir. I must go by Thursday, but perhaps I can come back next week. What do you think? She said, perhaps I can come back next week. Is her niece sick? Well, yes. Does she want a short holiday? Well, she wants to stop working. Or is it that she doesn't want to be near the house at Halloween? What do we think? In the comments, what do you think? Lorena, she wants a short holiday. Diane disagrees. She thinks that she doesn't want to be near the house at Halloween. Remember, she said, perhaps I can come back to you next week. So, Iram thinks, yeah, she doesn't want to be at the house at Halloween. Let's check that answer. We're getting a few other answers about holidays, but the reason is she's nervous and she doesn't want to be near the house at Halloween. She said, perhaps I can come back next week. But why must you leave this week? I asked. She looked nervous and went on slowly. They say, sir, that this was a big house in the old days and that many strange, dark things happened here. The owners, when young men, loved nothing better than attacking, robbing, and killing both men and women on land and sea. They were dangerous men, sir, and no one stood up against them. So year by year, they went from bad to worse. In the end, their terrible crimes against nature and all the deaths of the poor village children brought the lightning down from the sky to destroy them. I was pleased that Laura wasn't in the room. She was always nervous, and if I felt that these old stories would perhaps make our house less dear to her and make her very uncomfortable. Tell me more, Mrs. Dorman, I said. Please, I'm not like lots of young people these days who laugh at strange things like that. This was true in a way. I loved her stories, although I didn't really believe them. Well, sir, she began in a low voice, perhaps you've seen the two figures in the church? You mean the knights? I said cheerfully. Oh, I mean those two bodies, man-size, in marble. They say that at Halloween, those two bodies sit up. and get off their tombs, and that as the church clock strikes 11, they walk in their marble out of the church door, over the graves, and along the path. And where do they go? I asked interestedly. They come back here to the house, sir, and if anyone meets them... Well, what happens? I asked. But I couldn't get another word from her, although she warned me, lock the house early on Halloween, sir, and make the sign of the cross on the doors and the windows. I didn't tell Laura the tale of the figures that walked in their marble. Can we move on to the next question? There we are. I didn't tell Laura about this terrifying idea of the figures that walked in their marble. What did Mrs. Dorman tell Jack a story about? That's the next question, which should have been in that on the screen while I was reading. What do we have? Fatin is answering the previous question, I think. I'm going to scroll down. Hello, Fatin, how are you? Gay also answered number one. I think that's for the previous question. So let's, Hamza. Hamza is talking about the ghosts of the knights whose tombs are in the church. Saliha agrees and Fatin agrees. Indeed, yes, Mrs. Dorman tells Jack that story. So we can move on. Thank you, Fatin, for your answer, and Lorena and Hamza. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the next question. What does Jack decide to do? Does he decide to tell Laura about the story about the knights, to leave the cottage until after Halloween, or not to tell Laura? Let's see. I didn't tell Laura the tale of the figures that walked in their marble. I didn't want to upset her. This was, I felt, different from Mrs. Dorman's other stories, and I didn't want to talk about it until the day was past. So if you think you know the answer, type into the comments box right now. What did Jack decide? Oh, everybody's got that one as well. Welcome Tuyen Tran to the stream. And there we are, Lorena. Lorena thinks that Jack decides to leave the cottage. That's interesting. Hamza agrees with Fatin and Tuyen. Let's have a look at the answer. Remember, Jack does say, I didn't really believe her. Pabasara also thinks Jack decides not to tell Laura. Well, in fact, he does. He does decide not to tell Laura. Let's move on. Well, I'm going to leave you for a moment to read what you think will happen in part 2 while I finish reading part 1. So I didn't want to upset her. This was, I felt, different from Mrs. Dorman's other stories, and I didn't want to talk about it until the day was past. I was painting a picture of Laura in front of the window all of that week, and while I worked on it, I couldn't stop thinking about the tale of the two knights. On Thursday, Mrs. Dorman left, saying to Laura as she went, "Oh, don't go out too much, madam, and if there's anything I can do for you next week, I'll be happy to help." From that, I understood she wished to come back after Halloween, though to the end she continued with the story of her sick niece. Thursday went well. Laura cooked a lovely dinner and I washed the knives, forks and plates. Not too badly afterwards. Soon Friday came, and it's what happened then that this story is really about. So, before we read about Friday, what do you think happens? A, Mrs. Dorman returns with surprising news. Jack goes to the church in the evening and something terrible happens. B, C. Dr. Kelly is killed on his way to visit a patient. The Marble Knights leave the church. E.D. And finally, E. Laura is found dead in the cottage. As I'm reading part 2, make your mind up. I will come back to this in a moment. Again, if you'd like to take a screenshot, or maybe you have already taken a screenshot. If not, take a screenshot. Think about these if you're interested in knowing what's going to happen. These are some ideas to help you before I read. So take a screenshot with your mobile, or if you're using a mobile phone, take a quick screenshot. And as you're listening, think about what happens next. And I'll ask you in a moment for your ideas. Let's see, do we have some comments? Oh, lots of comments. And they're all B. They're all option B. Tuyen, Hamza, and Saliha all think that Jack goes to the church in the evening and something terrible happens. And Fatin thinks Jack will go to the church in the evening. Oh, Yin Lee, I know you know the answer. Please, thank you, but don't spoil it for everybody. Oh, most of us think it's Jack goes to the church and something terrible happens. Well, let's find out. I'll continue. Man Size in Marble Part 2. Everything that happened on that day is burned into my memory, and I'll tell the story as clearly as I can. I got up early, I remember, and had just managed to light the kitchen fire when my lovely wife Laura came running downstairs, as bright as that clear October morning. We enjoyed having breakfast together and lunch, and after lunch we decided to take a walk in the afternoon. During that walk, I remember reflecting that that was the happiest moment in my entire life. When we'd watched the sun go down and the evening mist thicken in the fields, we came back to the house silently, hand in hand. You're sad, dearest, I said, as we sat down together in our little sitting room. Yes, I am, she replied. Or a little uneasy. I don't think I'm very well. I've shivered 2 or 3 times since we came in. It isn't cold in here, is it, darling? Oh, you haven't caught a cold in the mist, have you? I asked her worriedly. Oh, I don't think so, she said. And then she added suddenly, Jack, do you ever feel something evil's going to happen? No, I smiled. I don't believe in that kind of thing. I do, she went on. The night my father died, I knew it, although he was far away in the north of Scotland. We sat watching the fire for some time in silence. In the end, she jumped up and kissed me on the cheek suddenly. Oh, don't worry about me, she said. I'm better now. What a baby I am. Let's play some music. So we spent a happy hour or 2 at the piano. At about 10:30, I felt I needed to smoke my pipe. Laura looked so white. I decided it would be awful to smoke inside, so I said, I'll take my pipe outside. I'll come too. Not tonight, dearest. Go to bed. You look really tired. I kissed her and was turning to go when she threw her arms around my neck and held me close, saying, I never want to let you go. Don't stay out too long. I won't. I walked slowly out of the front door, leaving it unlocked. What a night it was. The sky was full of dark clouds hurrying by, and a thin mist covered the stars. The moon swam high up above, disappearing sometimes behind the fast-moving cloud river, and sometimes shining down on the trees, which waved slowly and noiselessly below. There was a strange grey light that night, which shone over the earth. Everything was silent. Across the fields, I could see the church tower standing black in the sky. I heard the church bells strike. It was 11 o'clock already. I turned to go into the cottage, but the night held me. I couldn't go back into our warm, cozy rooms just yet. I decided to walk over to the church. I felt in a strange way I should offer up my thanks for my faithful, loving wife. I imagined then our long, sweet life together. As I walked along the edge of the wood, a sound came from among the trees that broke the stillness of the night. I could clearly hear footsteps that echoed mine. Oh, it's probably a villager looking for fallen branches for their fire, or hoping to catch some forest animal under cover of darkness, I thought. I turned into the wood. Now the footsteps seemed to come from behind in the path. Well, it must be an echo, I said to myself. Soon I was crossing the churchyard. I stopped for a while at the seat where Laura and I had watched the sun go down. And then I saw the church door was open. I felt bad about not closing it on our last visit, for we were the only people who came there except on Sundays. Then suddenly I remembered this was the day, this was the Halloween, the night of Halloween, and at the day and the hour, 11 o'clock, when the villagers believed the shapes in man-sized marble began to walk. I knew I had to go into the church. I planned to tell Mrs. Dorman I'd seen the knights there at 11 o'clock on Halloween, and that her tale was just a crazy story, nothing more. So I walked inside. It was dark. As I went towards the eastern end of the church, it seemed strangely larger. Then the moon came out and showed me the reason. The man-sized marble bodies were gone. Was I going crazy? I went forward and put my hand out to touch the flat tops of the tombs. Had someone stolen them? A sudden, nameless fear filled my heart, and I shivered. Something unbelievably evil was going to happen. I knew. I ran from the church, biting my lip to stop myself from screaming. I hurried across the fields towards the light that shone from our cottage window. But suddenly a black figure jumped out of the darkness, from the darkness in front of me. I ran towards it crazily, shouting, "Get out of my way!" But a hand took my arm and held it strongly. I wonder, whose hand is holding? I wonder, whose hand is holding Jack's arm? What do we have in the chat? In the comments. Let's have a look. Whose hand is it that is holding Jack's arm? And while I'm waiting, hello from Chad, Muhammad Abdullahi. Welcome to the story. Amit from Bangladesh, welcome. Who's holding Jack's arm as he's running across the field? Rossi, a knight. Pabasara, father of the church. Oh, we haven't, that's interesting. We haven't, this is a person we haven't been introduced to in the story, but it's a very good idea. It could be the father of the church, yes. Fatin, the knights who left their tombs. But they're made of marble, Fatin. How do they leave their tombs? Well, lots of ideas coming up. And welcome to Young Kyu from Thailand. Hamza, they are evil. So let's go back to the story. Thank you for your ideas. Where are we? Yes. A hand took my arm and held it strongly. The big Irish doctor shook me repeatedly. "Hey there," he cried. Let me go, I shouted. You don't understand. The marble figures have gone from the church. He laughed long and loud. You've been listening to too many old village tales, he said. I've seen the empty tombs. I tell you. Look, come with me. I'm going over to old Palmer's. His daughter's ill. We can stop at the church, and on the way, you can show me what you think you saw. All right, I said. He still held my arm as we entered the church and walked to the eastern end of it. I had my eyes closed. I knew that the figures wouldn't be there. I heard Dr. Kelly strike a match. Well, here they are, said the doctor, as large as life. I opened my eyes, and by the light of Dr. Kelly's match, I saw the two shapes lying in their marble on the tombs. Oh, thank you, I said. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, or perhaps I've been working too hard. I can't understand it. I'm sure they were gone. I know. Just don't let your thoughts run away with you now, boy. He was looking closely at the figure on the right, whose stony face was the most evil and deadly. Where will you look at that? He said, pointing. The hand on this one's broken. He was right. But I was sure that the last time Laura and I had been there, the hand was perfect. Perhaps someone was trying to steal them, he said calmly. But that still doesn't explain what I thought I saw. Too much painting and perhaps too much smoking of your old pipe there explains that. Ha, he laughed. Oh, let's go, I said, feeling a little bit better. My wife will be worried. Come and have a glass of something with me. We'll drink to logical explanations and to hell with ghosts. All right, it's late. I'll go to old Palmer's in the morning, he replied. Perhaps he thought that I needed his help more than Palmer's daughter. So, talking of different explanations for ghosts, we walked back to my cottage, and as we came nearer, I saw the light shining out of the front door. The sitting room was open. Had Laura gone out? Oh, come in, I said, and Dr. Kelly followed me into the sitting room. It was brightly lit by candles all over the place. Light, I remembered, was Laura's answer to being nervous. Poor girl, I thought. I'd been so stupid to leave her. But where was she? Then I turned to the open window and I saw her. Had she gone there to watch for me? And what had come into the room behind her? To what had she turned her face full of horror? My poor wife! Had she thought it was my footsteps she'd heard as she turned to meet? What? She'd fallen back across a table by the window, and her body lay half on it and half on the window seat. Her head was thrown back. Her long, untidied hair was touching the carpet. Her lips were pulled back from her teeth, and her eyes were wide open in fear. They saw nothing now. What had they seen? What was the last thing they had seen? The doctor moved towards her, but I pushed him to one side and ran to her, crying, "It's all right, Laura, you're safe now." Her soft body fell against mine. I held her and kissed her, calling her name again and again, but I think I knew already that she was dead. Both her hands were closed, and in one of them she held something very strongly. When I was quite sure that she was dead and that nothing mattered anymore, I let Dr. Kelly open that hand to see what it held. It was a grey marble finger. Oh, what a story. If you have just joined us, I'm shivering with fear. The ending always does that to me. Hello, Naziha from Morocco. You can watch the recording to catch up with what happened if you have just joined us. If you have been following the story, what about your predictions? What happened in the end? Anna, what did you think was going to happen? Was that a surprise?
It was a surprise. What an ending and what a story. Oh, one of those like scary ghost stories, I think. Wasn't expecting that at all. Did anyone else guess the ending? Do let us know in the chat if you did.
Yeah, I think they're all unable to type in the in the comments. So there we have it. Remember, the story was written 120 years ago in 1893, I think I said. It's been abridged as a graded reader. And not at all, Sion. I enjoy reading the story. To tell you the honest truth, it wasn't the first time I read the story. Anna, why did you think? You asked me to choose a story to read, correct?
Yes, out of curiosity, we're really interested to know why you chose this particular story, why this ghost story.
Okay. Well, the first time I read the story, I didn't know the ending. And in part two, I began suspecting. Remember, this was 120 years ago that it was written, but I began suspecting the husband. I began fabricating in my imagination a kind of Alfred Hitchcock, a kind of rear window scenario of something happening that wasn't quite right. And that was my 21st century mind imposing upon a 19th century story. So there we are. I found it really, really interesting because I wasn't expecting the finger of the Marble Knight. And as Fatin says, she fought him till the death.
Mm.
Courageous woman. And I rather like the ending. If you just joined us and a bit of a spoiler there, but do please, if you've just joined us, do watch the recording and enjoy the story. Charak, unexpected indeed. I hope you enjoyed that reading. And if there are people who meet together to celebrate Halloween, Lorena, maybe one thing you can do if you're having a Halloween party is play them this story. You know, just a suggestion.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much for that,
Alex.
Paul. As Alex said, you're a legendary storyteller, and it's a really good one for the imagination. So we hope that everybody who's watching the live streams really enjoyed that reading and the interaction with Paul. It was really great. So thanks again, Paul, for that. This title, along with many others, is available for purchase, and it's also available on the Oxford Reading Club, which is a new digital library platform which supports students with reading, and it's got a unique 5-step process, including audio. So it's a really nice place to learn and get better with your reading. We've got a huge variety of titles across different levels. There's something to suit everybody on there. If you're interested in finding out more, do check out the Oxford Reading Club free trial, where you'll be able to access the platform and sample some of our readers on there as well. And if you liked this session, make sure you give it a like. And if you loved it, then do give it a love heart on social media. It really means the world to us when you share these kinds of streams. And if you know a teacher or a student who needs this in their life, then do tag them in the comments below. It really does help us out. And I think they're going to really enjoy this one as well. We want to make sure that all the sessions are about you, so about our teaching community and about our student community. So if you comment right now and tell us what you'd like us to talk about next, is there another reading you'd like us to talk about, or if there's any other subjects you'd like us to talk about, do let us know. And make sure you're following us as well to not miss any of the sessions we've got coming up. For our teachers, we're OUP Global, and that's on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. So do give us a follow, and it's just written in the banner just below me there. And for our students, we are Learning English with Oxford on our Facebook and Instagram, and there is a link in the chat as well. So do give us a follow on either of those channels. And I would hope you would all like to join me virtually by giving a huge thank you to Paul
Could
And I
just
think he's got
sorry, Anna,
yeah,
just sorry
yeah,
to interrupt just for one moment. We've got a couple
of
of minutes.
course.
I
Yes.
wanted to thank Charak. He says in the comments, I use graded readers and will surely recommend this one to my students. I just wanted to thank Charak for that comment, because when recommending graded readers, do please remember the golden rule: a level below their ability. So we're talking here about a reader which is at B1 level. In other words, Common European Framework level B1. In other words, you need to have a good high intermediate B2 level of English to be able to read the story without having to check in your dictionary a lot of vocabulary. I would strongly recommend, Charak, and thank you for that, that you recommend this to your intermediate or advanced readers. We have used some of the questions there to guide the reading. There are questions in the middle of the story. There are activities as well for the readers. But the worst thing that we can do is to recommend readers which are at the ability level of a student or above, because it's demotivating. And I'm very happy that you mentioned that, because that's a golden rule of graded reading. Anna, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all. I think that's a really good point, and we want to make reading fun for everybody. And by doing that, I
We
think that's a
certainly,
really good way to do it.
yeah,
So let's give it up
okay.
to Paul to say thank you so much for the session today. I think, as we all can attest to, he did a fantastic job and really brought that reader to life. So we hope you enjoyed the session as well. And thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Anna. And thank you to everybody who either joined us at the beginning or joined us later on, or those of you who will join us watching the recording. Really hope you enjoyed the story, you enjoy the story, and until the next time.
Bye.